Hello and welcome to today's editing session on how to use Photoshop Elements. Today we'll be using an advanced technique to show you how to take photographs of people that might have skin blemishes, such as shown in the photo on the left, how to remove those blemishes, and then going a step further and showing how to put a silky, glowing mask over the image, creating what some might call a glamour shot. We will be using Photoshop Elements 18 in our examples. However, everything that we are doing can be done with Photoshop Elements 14 or newer. Our editing session will consist of 5 simple steps. First, we'll show you how to open the file. Then we will remove blemishes from the photo. The next thing we will do is smooth the skin, and when we do that we have to go over and make sure that we recover anything that should be crisp. The final thing we will do is add some lighting effects so that the face on photo, where she's facing directly into the light, has a little bit of shadow into it, giving a little more dynamic to the photo itself. We will go through these steps one at a time using Photoshop Elements on the screen as an example and lead you through each step. We're going to begin our editing session by opening up the photo that we wish to edit. We will do that by taking our cursor and going to the upper left-hand corner, clicking on the word File, coming down, hitting Open, and then navigating to the photo that we wish to edit. In this case, it's called blemished.jpg. It's a JPEG file. We click on it. We can either double click on it to open or click on it once and hit the Open key. As you see, the photo doesn't take up much of our workspace, and it would be to our advantage to make it larger. I can do that using the Control plus and minus keys, or I can pick up the zoom tool and then use the zoom slider. So let's make it nice and big. The next thing I want to do is I want to copy that background layer. So I'm going to hit Control J, which is our shortcut for copying a layer. And I'm going to rename it. I'll do that by clicking on the layer, right-clicking, saying Rename Layer, type the word Full Face, and hitting my Enter key. The next thing I'm going to do is to hide the original layer. I'll do that by going to the eye icon, shown right here, and clicking on it. That layer is now not part of our editing session. The reason I am doing this is so I have a reference to go back on when we make our final edits. We can see where we started from. The next step in our editing process is to remove the blemishes from her face. To do this, we will be using the spot healing brush, shown on the left-hand side where my cursor is. I'll hover over the brush and I'll click it. When I do that, the options for that brush appear on the bottom. So let's make sure that the spot healing brush is the one selected. You can do that by going to the left icon and clicking on it. Make sure the proximity match is the proper parameter. This means that when we heal, it's going to look around the area, the proximity, to figure out what to replace the blemish with. We'll take our brush and we'll make it approximately 9 pixels, and we'll use a soft brush. You can change the brushes by clicking on this little icon here. It will bring up different brushes. Here we go. And we're ready to edit now. If you take a look, I'm moving down my cursor. You can see the little circle. I'm going to dab or click over the blemishes. I'm not going to drag on a regular basis. I might drag sometimes, but not too much, because when you do that, you might introduce some artifacts. So all I'm doing is going over each of the areas where she might have a blemish or a pimple, and drag a little bit. But don't drag big, huge areas. And what I'm doing is I'm just removing them one by one I'm not trying to make the skin perfect at this stage. I'm just trying to remove the big objectionable blemishes. In this area here, there's some shadow, so don't get rid of too much of the shadow. So we've done a pretty good job getting rid of most of the blemishes, and we can move on really to the next step. The next step in our editing process is to smooth the skin out and give it a nice glow. We'll do this in several steps. The first thing I'm going to do is to select the Quick Select tool, which is shown right here on the left-hand side where my mouse is pointing. I will click on it to select it. I've got my cursor. It's a good size, not too big, not too small. And what I'm going to do is select the main portion of the face by dragging across it. And as you can see, I got a lot more than I really wanted. I got some hair up here and I got some neck. What I will do is, if you look at the cursor, when I press my alternate button, that little plus turns to a minus. Let's let go of its plus, it's minus. I will hold down the Alt key, which says I'm going to subtract from my selection. I just kind of click in the area, and Photoshop does a pretty good idea of finding the closest boundary. Go up here in the hair area, click a couple of times. I'm still on minus. And I'm going to take out some of the areas I really don't want to smooth. And if I make a mistake, as shown right here, not a big deal. Let go of the alternate key, turns back to a plus. I add it back in. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I want to put this onto a new layer. I will use the shortcut Control-J. And as you see, a new layer was created in the layer panel called layer number 1. But only the areas inside my selection were moved to that new layer. That's very important. Now we're going to use a new tool called a filter. I go to the top, I click on filter. I'm going to blur her face a little bit. So I go to blur, and I'm going to use what's called Gaussian blur. And I like to use about 2%. What we're seeing here is a little too much, so I take my slider on the bottom, going to move it down to about 2%. And you can look in the skin area, you see it's kind of nice and smooth and soft, but her eyes are also covered. We'll worry about that later. I'm going to undo the preview. Here's where she was, here's where she is. I'll hit OK. But nobody has a perfect, silky, smooth skin. So we're going to add some noise, which is another filter. I go to Filter, I come down where it says Noise. I'm going to add noise. Noise is just something that is thrown randomly into the photo. Let me slide to the right so you can see what happens when there's a lot of noise. Certainly we don't want that. We can choose Uniform. It's called Gaussian or monochromatic noise. I like to use Uniform, full color noise, but I only want to use about 1.5%. So I'm going to type in 1.5. And as you see on her skin, there's a little bit of texture to the skin. I'll take the preview off, put it back on, off, on, and then I will say OK. Now at the top of the layers panel, in this area right here, there's some symbols. I'm going to choose this symbol right here, which I'll make blink and unblink. That actually adds a mask to the current layer. So I click on it, I've got a mask, and around that mask is a blue highlight indicating that mask is active. We will use the results of this edit and that mask in our next step. So we did a pretty good job of smoothing out the skin, giving it some texture. However, we also blurred the eyes, the nose, the eyebrows, the lips, things really that we didn't want to blur. We're going to use our layer mask to subtract those elements out of the edit we just made. And the way we'll do that is by using the paintbrush and painting over those areas. But we'll do that on the layer mask. If you recall, in the last section, we created a layer mask. We're sure it's active. If it's not, just double click on the layer mask itself. Now I'm going to pick up a paintbrush by going to the left-hand side. I want to make sure my color is on black. If it's not black, for instance, if it was a different color, let me just do that here. You simply click on it, find that little circle, bring it to the lower left-hand corner, which is black. There's no color if you look right here. Say OK. This brush is way, way, way too big. What we want to do is get a small brush that we can work with. So let's go choose a brush that's around, again, 9 pixels is a pretty good size for this photo, depending upon the photo you're working on. It could be larger, it could be less. What you want is a brush that gives you the flexibility to detail and paint over an area without capturing too much. We want the opacity of the brush to be about 50%. Does not have to be an exact number. What that means is, as we're painting, we're not going to paint everything out. That allows us to get close to edges and not do a lot of damage, but we can go over it several times. If you go over it twice, then you take more of it out. I'm going to take the paintbrush, I'm going to begin painting over the areas that I do not want blurred. I'll start in the center here. You see the eye is coming back. I'm going to go here, I'm going to go up, I'm going to pick up her eyelid and look at that, all that detail is back. And it's back because it was there and we blurred it before. So I'm being very careful. And she probably has some little hairs on the bottom of her eyelid, or her eye rather. So we're going to pick that up. That eye has been restored. I'll do the same thing on this side here. I'm going to pick up the intersection. I want to make sure I get her eyelid. I want to get the eyeball, of course. And as I said, every time we do this, we're only picking up 50%. So you may want to go over it several times to make sure you get all of it. There we go. It's bringing in, there's the sheen from her eyelid. Let's try a little bit more over here again. I want to make sure I get every bit of it. Now, a little more tricky to get the eyebrow. As I get to this side over here, that brush is a little big. So I'm going to hit the left bracket key to make that paintbrush a little smaller. And I'm going to go here now and start picking up or painting out the changes we made from the eyebrow. And I'm going to do it several times to make sure I get all of the change out. And if you look at what's going on, now you start beginning to see her hairs again. Compare this eyebrow here to the one on the right. Now I'll go back to the right. I'll pick this one up. There we go. So we've gone back and found the detail in our eyebrows. Let's see what else we should do. Well, certainly the lips. We did a job of really smoothing those lips out. We want to bring that back and kind of recover the smile. So we want to stay pretty much in the pink area. We don't want to go too much outside of the actual lips. Again, we'll do it several times. I'm going to bring that back in. There we go. Come down just a little more over here. So now we've recovered that. The other thing we need to recover is her nostrils. Got picked up also, so let's go over here and paint. Certainly bring in the nostril itself very quickly. And then gently kind of trace the nose part way up, which means to bring some of that shadow back in. You don't want to lose all of it, but follow just the outline of the nose. Don't go over the nose itself. So here we are with our photo, and here's our mask. And I think we did a pretty good job. We can check how well we've done by hovering over the mask, going out to the side a little bit in this blue area, right-clicking, and here's a little thing called Disable Layer Mask. All that's going to do is to take off what we have done. If you look at that, there is the photo before we put the mask on. I can right click again, enable the layer mask. And there it is. And if you look actually at the layer mask, you can see what we have edited. So I think we did a pretty good job. So that looks pretty good. We could consider it done, or we could go a little further. It looks like our model was facing right into the camera, so the lights are right on her face. Let's add a little bit of shadow to our right side or her left cheek and see if we can add some depth to the photo to give it some more realism. To do so, I'm going to choose my paintbrush. And the first thing I'm going to do is create a dodge burn layer. We're going to burn a little bit over here, but not burning on the photo. We're going to do it on a layer. So we go to Layer, we go to New, I'm going to create a new layer. Where it says Mode, we're going to choose Soft Light. We're going to say to fill it by clicking on this check mark right here with 50% gray. And we'll give it about a 20%, maybe, there we go, opacity, and say OK. The 20% means that only about 20% of what we do will show up on the photo itself. And we can adjust this again, also layer. So we have our layer created. Let's go pick up our paintbrush. We want to paint with black. The first thing we notice is the colors are not correct. So we could click in here and bring the colors down. Let me show you quickly how you would do that. To here, or cancel that. A shortcut is if you have a brush selected, you type the letter D on your keyboard. The color pickers will go, the color patterns will go from to black in the foreground, white in the background. Very quick, easy way to do that. I want to use a soft brush because I'm going to be painting over the face, not a hard one. So let me go down and pick up any of the soft brushes. You can see it's soft, but it's kind of fuzzy in the picture over here. I don't want to use a small brush to paint because I don't want to be doing this. So I'm going to choose a large brush. I'm going to use about 90 pixels. I can use the slider, or I can use my right bracket key. I think I'll do that. The size depends upon the size of your photo. In this case, 90 pixels is about right. I want to make broad brushes across it. I'm going to go down, and I think I'll take my opacity. Maybe I'll move that down a bit to maybe 20%, somewhere in that range. Now I'm going to make sure layer 2 is selected. I'll click on it to make sure. I'm going to now make strokes from the top to the bottom on my model's face, adding just a little bit of dodging. And there we go. And I can check my work by disabling the layer with the little eyeball there. And you can see what's happening up here. There's without darkening. That's with a little bit of darkening. So all we're doing is just adding a little bit of shadow to our picture. You don't want to overdo this. So again, here's without, here's with. So that concludes this lesson. We started with a photo which was a model that had severe acne. Let me bring that one back up. I started from here. We then did some healing. I'm clicking this on it, I'll show you the healing. Then we added some silky smooth skin. We made sure to not add that silk in critical areas that should be sharp. And the final step was to add just a little bit of shadow to it. So thank you for sticking with this. It's a very quick, easy way. There's a million ways to do things in Photoshop. This is not the only way, but it gives you an idea of one of the ways to accomplish this very interesting edit.